Okay, so Sam, originally I said to you I wanted to talk about trauma bonding, but yes, I had a bit of a change of heart. So if it's okay with you, I'd
Yeah.
love to talk about the narcissist cycle, the idealization, love bombing, devalue, discard cycle. And clearly, I've got some questions for you. So yes, I'll just start like I'm beginning, and I can kind of cut all this out. And yeah, we'll get going. Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fake Love and Flying Monkeys. I am so grateful to have another very special guest joining me today. I'm sure many of you will have read his work, read his book, watched his numerous videos, and gained so much insight from your research. His name is Dr. Sam Vaknin. Now, Dr. Sam is an Israeli writer and a professor of psychology and business studies. He is the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited, and IMF and World Bank affairs consultant for several nation states. He also was the last editor-in-chief of the previous political news website Global Politician, and he runs a private website with content about psychological themes such as narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, psychopathy, abuse, victimization by stalkers, as well as other topics such as philosophical and socio-political and economic issues. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Sam Vaknin. Welcome, Sam. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me. And we have to thank Wikipedia for the for the introduction. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I'm so glad you pointed me in that direction. Wow, what a wealth of expertise that you have. Look, Sam, in this episode, I wanted to chat with you about the narcissist cycle, in particular, how victims are chosen by the narcissist and how they're idealized and then devalued, of course, and devalued and discarded. So, the first question I have for you is one that I get asked so many times by my beautiful clients who come to see me in their narcissistic abuse recovery. And that is, what traits or vulnerabilities do narcissists typically target when they're selecting victims? Why do these qualities make someone a prime source for narcissistic supply?
That's a myth. Narcissists don't target anyone. And they couldn't care less about your qualities or properties or traits or personal history or predilections or dreams or wishes. You don't exist. You're just
Mhm.
an instrument. You're a prop in the narcissist theater production. Um, Victims are disoriented following an experience with a narcissist. Most victims are disoriented, and they feel that the order and structure that have permeated and pervaded the universe prior to the relationship has all but vanished. They feel that everything has been turned into chaos and mayhem. So they try to make sense of what has happened. And one way to make sense of what has happened is to aggrandize yourself, to say, I must have been chosen. I'm very special. I'm super empathic, an empath, whatever that nonsensical word means. I
Mhm.
am kind, I'm nice, I'm helpful, I'm this, I'm that. And I've been chosen because in some ways I'm superior. In some ways I'm unique. And that is, of course, a
Mhm.
narcissistic defense. So the narcissist triggers in you your own narcissism. Narcissism is contagious. The truth is that the narcissist couldn't care less who you are. The narcissist cares a lot about what he can obtain from you, what you can give him or her. Half of all narcissists are women. I'm going to use the male pronouns, male gender pronouns, but half of them are women. They care a lot about what you can give them. And I've reduced it to four, what I call the four S's. If you provide the narcissist with two out of these four, two of these four, then you're in. You pass the job interview, you're accepted. And this
Mm-hmm.
is sex, supply, narcissistic, or more rarely, sadistic supply, the pleasure of your pain, shall we say, safety, your willingness to stick around despite egregious abuse and misconduct on the part of the narcissist that endows the narcissist with a sense of safety, secure base, as we call it in psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, services. You should service the narcissist. If you're willing and able to participate in the narcissist's shared fantasy and to provide two of these four, then, as I said, you're in. And it has nothing to do with how empathic you are, whether you're nice or not, what's your personal history, how, and even how you look. The narcissist victims, the narcissist insignificant others, they are completely interchangeable. They're completely commoditized. It's like so many grains of rice. We don't
Mm-hmm.
particularly care how does a specific grain of rice look. We care about the nutritional value of the rice. It's the same with the
Mm-hmm.
narcissist. So all these myths and legends online on people being chosen because of their traits, because of their advantages, because of their empathy, because of their compassion, because of their willingness to care and help, because of this and because of that, all of them have nothing to do, unfortunately, with reality. And that's precisely why the narcissist can transition seamlessly and instantaneously from his last victim to his next victim, usually within the day, if he's very slow. That's
Right.
because they are indistinguishable from each other. But of course,
Okay.
victims hate to hear that. They dislike
Yeah.
this. They hate to hear this. They say, it's not true. I've been chosen. I've been chosen because I'm super empathic and you took advantage of it. Or I've been chosen because of this or that. There is the opposite question, which is indeed relevant. Which victims are attracted to the narcissist? While the narcissist is indiscriminate and promiscuous, anyone would do. There are specific types of people who are attracted to narcissists. And these would be people
Okay.
with borderline personality disorder, people with dependent personality disorder, also known as codependence,
Mm-hmm.
people who are broken and damaged, people in the throes of a crisis, a life crisis, and they're very vulnerable at that point. People who are looking for supreme self-confidence and leadership, so the naturally submissive, masochists, and so on. So there are specific psychological or psychopathological profiles who are attracted to narcissists inexorably and very powerfully. The other way is not true. The narcissist, as I said, couldn't care less who you are.
Right. They'll settle for whoever's in the right proximity to them as long as they are willing, as you said, to meet their needs in some way. I heard you say that they have to be willing. So I'm kind of focusing on that word, Sam, because as you know, many victims will say, well, hey, I actually wasn't willing to, to put up with that. I just found myself here and I actually don't believe that maybe many of them do, but I don't believe that, I meet that certain criteria. So, what do you say to those people who would negate that and say, well, hey, I wasn't looking for this?
As I said earlier, victims desperately attempt to make sense of what has happened to them. It's exactly like
Right.
being exposed to a natural disaster or a force of nature. You ask yourself, why me? There is survivor guilt. Many people die, you survive. You ask, why me? There's always the question, why me? There is the assumption that things don't happen arbitrarily. The world, the
Yeah.
universe is not capricious, or as Albert Einstein said, God doesn't play dice. So, if you ended up being somewhere with someone, it must designate, must denote some kind of meaning. It's a meaningful thing. People
Okay.
refuse to accept that the universe is chaotic and arbitrary, that the vast majority of things that happen to people are meaningless, that our lives are essentially meaningless, that we are just accidents. And, we start as an accident, we end up as accidents. This is a worldview which is exceedingly difficult for people to accept, and that's why people resort to delusions such as religion and God and other such nonsense, because they need to make sense of their lives. And so there's a panoply, a variety of narratives. One of the narratives is that I'm unique. I have been chosen for this suffering. The other is I've been deceived. The narcissist is such a good actor. He pulled the wool over my eyes. I was not aware of what was happening to me until much later. And then it was too late. Studies since 1970 have demonstrated conclusively that this is utter nonsense, balderdash. Victims are perfectly aware of everything within the first few seconds of the encounter. Actually, we have a clinical name for it. It's called the uncanny valley reaction. When potential victims, are in the presence of a narcissist or a psychopath, by the way, they react. They have a gut reaction. Their intuition, there's alarm bells going on. And there is a strong sense of discomfort and physiological reactions. It's all been documented. Similarly, we're finding out that when people are exposed to humanoid robots who resemble human beings, they have the uncanny valley reaction as well. So when you come across a narcissist the first time, when you date the narcissist, or first date or something, of course you know that something is wrong. You know that this creature facing you is somehow incomplete, somehow half-baked, somehow there's something awry, something not put well together. There's some notes which are off-key. So how come victims absolutely insist, that they've been deceived by the narcissist's thespian skills and amazing acting? How come they insist? Because they deny.
Sam, can I just interject there and make myself the victim? And I would say to you as a victim that when I met the narcissist, they were pretending to be someone who was nice, and I believed the persona they
No, you did
were
not believe.
showing me.
You did not believe, actually. Studies show conclusively that you did not believe. However,
Okay,
you needed to believe. You
okay.
convinced yourself. You suppressed
So
your instincts.
sorry, Sam. I'd love for you to explain the difference so people listening can really understand that.
Something in you tells you that something's wrong, and then you deny it. There's a variety of ways to deny it. For example, you can say, well, nothing's wrong with that guy. I'm having a bad day. Something's wrong with me. This is called autoplastic defense. So you're blaming yourself for this discomfort or this feeling of ill at ease. You're saying it's something's wrong with me. I've had a bad day or whatever. Or you're so lonely and you're so broken and you're so damaged, you're willing to compromise. You're willing to settle for anything. The mechanisms are at work are mechanisms of denial, reframing. You do possess all the relevant information within minutes, but you deny it, reframe it, ignore it, attribute it to something else, to you, to the circumstances, to the environment, to the situation, to whatever, just not to the real source, which is a narcissist facing you. Narcissists act, of course they do. Narcissists act, psychopaths are even better actors than narcissists. But not for long, and this acting is easily pierceable. You can pierce the veil pretty easily, and most people do within minutes. The first studies of the uncanny valley reaction were conducted in 1970 by a roboticist, Masahiro Mori, in Japan. And ever since then, we've had a growing body of evidence, and by now it's overwhelming, that people actually do possess the correct information about other people, literally within minutes, that they weigh around 1,000 factors, including 100 biochemical markers, and that within a few minutes, they form a 90% accurate picture of the other person.
Mm-hmm.
While intuition is wrong about the world 50% of the time, intuition is wrong about other people only 10% of the time. Our intuition is geared to evaluate other people, to gauge other people appropriately, although it is a complete failure when it comes to reality, to the world, to events, to processes, to circumstances. When it comes to other people, we get it right most of the time. But then we say to ourselves, I'm being too judgmental, or I've had a bad day, or I'm so lonely, I need to compromise. I need to compromise. Or he is having a bad day, or it's endearing. His behavior is endearing, or his behavior shows how much he cares about me. For example, if he's super jealous, it's because he loves me. If he's abusive, that's an indication that he's attached to me.
Right.
Even much later in the relationship, many victims justify the abuser. They take the abuser's point of view, and they justify the abuse in a variety of ways. So it's very common to find victims of abuse saying, my husband or wife, as the case may be, is very jealous, is very controlling, but that's because he loves me more than anything in the world. For example, the human mind is malleable and would give you what you want. If what you want is to find a mate, a partner, your mind will falsify everything imaginable just to give you that partner that you are looking for, that you are seeking. You're not a scientist. When you go on a date, you're not a scientist. You're not you go on a date with big hopes, with expectations, with imagination, with fantasy, a Disney, a Disney kind of thing. You hope maybe he's the one. Maybe something beautiful is going to come up out of this, You don't go on a date and saying, okay, now I'm going to clinically analyze this guy. I'm going to observe all his body language and behaviors and facial expressions, which, by the way, betray narcissism within seconds.
Mm-hmm.
The haughty look, the specific stares of the psychopath, these cannot be falsified. The way the narcissist and psychopath interact with other people, either they are contemptuous, abrasive, and aggressive, or they're overly nice, ingratiating, and so on. In both cases, it's clear that something is out of the ordinary here. And yet, you deny and ignore all this because you're in need, because you're suffering in some way, and you perceive this as a panacea, as a medicine, as a solution. We falsify everything. We falsify not only a potential date, we falsify political views, we falsify everything is psychological defense mechanisms are essentially ways of falsifying reality. When you rationalize, when you project, it's about falsifying. And everyone is possessed of psychological defense mechanisms. Our perception of reality is almost completely false. It's mediated by filters, upon membranes, upon filters. We never get the true picture. But if you were to sit back and listen to this tiny voice in the inner recesses of your mind, tiny voice that tells you, what's wrong with this guy? He's too controlling, or he appears to be acting, or is too nice, or is too not nice. Or if you were to listen to this tiny voice, you would simply get up and leave. Simply, but you would never do this. It's extremely rare. You would never do this because you are there, not for him, but for yourself. You're there to cater to your own psychological needs. You are needy in these situations.
So, Sam, what behaviors does the narcissist engage in, or do they engage in different behaviors than a person who does not have NPD? What do they do to make their victims feel uniquely valued? How do they get them hooked, essentially?
I will give you a rule of thumb, you and our viewers. I will give a rule of thumb here.
Mm-hmm.
Narcissism and definitely psychopathy are caricatured, exaggerated human beings. The narcissist does everything a normal human being does. He behaves in a way that a normal human being behaves. So does the psychopath. It's all absolutely normal, only it's highly exaggerated. If the
Mm.
narcissist is, when the narcissist is nice to people, he is ostentatiously nice. He is conspicuously nice. He's amazingly nice. He's incredibly nice. When he is unpleasant and aggressive to people, he is abrasive. He is on the verge of violence. He is unbridled and unconstrained and uncontrolled. When he is nice to you, he is laser focused on you. He just He's like a sponge. He wants to know more and more and more, and he never talks about himself. When it's the other way, when he talks only about himself, he couldn't care less about you. He doesn't bother to ask you anything about yourself. It's always an extreme. It's always a pole of some kind. It's always at the very end of the spectrum.
Right.
When you date someone, they talk a bit about themselves and they ask you questions about yourself, and that's normal behavior, and so does the narcissist. But it's exaggerated. If the narcissist, when the narcissist talks about himself, it's only about himself, and it can go on for hours. If he talks about you, if he asks you a question, it's only about you, and this could go on for hours. There's also the issue of speed, alacrity. Any interaction with the narcissist, or mostly with the narcissist, is sped up, is like double or triple the speed. So with a normal, average, healthy, ostensibly human being, you go through all these phases, but they take 3 months. With a narcissist, they take 3 days. On a
Mm.
first date, he's moving in with you. On a second date, you get married. And on a third date, you plan whether you argue whether you should have 2 children or 4 children together.
Mm.
Now, this happens with healthy people as well, but it takes 6 months. With a narcissist, I'm not exaggerating, 3, 4 meetings. So the
Yes.
alacrity is a major warning sign. The speed, the intensity, the focus, the overpowering, domineering, overwhelming, immersive, all-consuming environment the narcissist creates, which is a good description of what we call the shared fantasy. Gradually, the narcissist drags you away from reality. Through his gaze, he forces you into a tunnel. You're embedded in the tunnel. And everything else around you vanishes, evaporates, dissipates, and you are there alone with him in a universe of your own making. That's how he. Now, initially, the narcissists go through phases long before the love bombing. The narcissist spots you. So when a narcissist enters a room, he would scan the room. A room could be a church, a pub, family, household, you name it, any physical space. This is known as pathological narcissistic space. The first thing he does, he scans people. And you can see him scanning. It's like physical. He would move his eyes around and he would home in on people and then measure them, take their measure for like 5 minutes, or he could suddenly get stuck for 10 minutes on someone, staring at them without saying a word, glaring, and. So there's this scanning process. I call it spotting.
Mm-hmm.
Having scanned the environment, the narcissist zeroes in on 2, 3 people he thinks might provide him with 2 of the 4 S's and might become willing participants in the shared fantasy. And then he subjects them to 3 tests, essentially. And this, I call this part of the process auditioning. He auditions them. So he finds out whether they are likely to be submissive and cooperative. He finds out whether these particular people can provide sex, are amenable to providing sex. Are they able to provide the services he's looking for? Are they good sources, superior sources of high-grade narcissistic supply? Or if he's a sadist, do they respond well to pain in a way which is
Mm-hmm.
arousing and exciting? And so on and so forth. So there are these tests, the auditioning phase. And then if you pass
Yeah.
the audition, you get the part. And it's a movie.
So, Sam, can I just ask you then, who doesn't pass the test? Who is the narcissist going to go, yeah,
Well,
you're out.
if you don't find the narcissist immediately, instantaneously irresistible, then you don't pass the test. If you
Right,
don't have a car and you don't drive, and the narcissist is looking for a chauffeur, a driver, you don't pass the test. I'm kidding you not. If a narcissist is looking for access to something or contacts, a social network, instantaneous social network, to leverage this network for some reason to obtain supply, and you're not, you're schizoid, you're avoidant, you're introverted, and so on, you don't pass the test. It depends on the specific narcissist with his specific goals, the specific services he requires, your ability to provide narcissistic supply. So, for example, if you're dumb, you don't pass the test because dumb people provide low-grade narcissistic supply.
right.
So there is this testing going on, starting with sex. Do you find him irresistible? Are you willing to be submissive in sex? Are you willing to engage in kinky, willing to be kinky, and so on? It's an integral part of narcissism because narcissists are autoerotic. In other words, they make love to themselves. They're sexually attracted to themselves via the agency and intermediation of a partner. So you need to be there just to facilitate the narcissist's infatuation with himself. That requires a lot of kink. So
Right.
there's this initial test, and then the next test is services. Do you have a car? Are you well connected? Are you outgoing? Are you this? Are you that? Do you look, if his thing is if he's somatic, if he places an emphasis on how you look, then your looks, etc. So are you able to provide services? The next thing is supply. Are you willing to provide? And the final thing is, can he trust you to be there regardless of how much and to which extent he tortures you? In other words, will you stick around despite the egregious abuse that he's about to inflict on you? And
And
here
how does he do that? How does a
he
narcissist assess a victim for torture? Because a
good
victim would
question.
describe that stage as, I guess, fireworks and lightning bolts and the love at first sight, where it sounds
That's a
like
bit
you're
later.
describing.
That's a bit later.
Sorry?
That's a bit later. That's a love bombing. I'm coming to that.
Yes.
You're still at the
Okay.
auditioning stage. This is the auditioning stage. He evaluates the question of whether you will stick around by gauging your maternal aspects because he's looking for a mother. The whole thing is about finding a mother. So he's gauging your maternal aspects. He may ask you openly if you're a mother, if you have children, or he may trot out, he may introduce you to the childlike aspects of his personality. He may infantilize in front of you and gauge your reaction. He kind of introduces you to his inner child. And the inner child in the narcissist is suffering, is hurt, is traumatized, is in need of protection and help. He triggers your overprotective maternal instincts and he sits back and he evaluates you. If you react as a mother would to this display of childlike, infantilized features of the narcissist, then you're in, because this means that you're a mother by nature and you're unlikely to abandon him, unlikely to walk away, unlikely to break up with him or dump him, despite everything that he's about to do to you. So now we transition to the next phase. You've passed the audition with flying colors. You're the perfect patsy. And now we pass to the next stage. And the next stage is a love bombing, which is the stage you've described. In the love bombing phase, what the narcissist does, he idealizes you. You can do no wrong. You're drop dead gorgeous. You're hyper intelligent. You're unprecedented. He's never had such an experience in his entire life. You're the most amazing creature that he's ever come across. He would not conceive of spending another minute without you. Da 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 da. And all this intended actually to idealize himself, not you. What he does when he idealizes you, he's idealizing himself. Because if he is in possession of such a prize object, if he is your so-called intimate partner, if he owns you, because in his mind, he owns you, narcissists are incapable of perceiving your separateness and your externality. What they do, they snapshot you, they introject you, they create an internal object that represents you in the narcissist's mind. So from that moment on, you belong to the narcissist. You're a figment of his imagination. At that point, you need to be ideal because the narcissist is ideal. The narcissist is godlike. He's perfect. He's omniscient. He's omnipotent. He's everything. He's dreamlike. It can't be that an internal object in the narcissist's mind will be less than perfect, imperfect. No way. So he needs to Photoshop you. He takes a snapshot of you and he Photoshops it. And he renders you perfect in order to preserve and maintain his own perfection. And this is a
Right.
process known as co-idealization. Having
Right.
idealized you, now you belong to the narcissist. And because you are his possession, he's in ownership of you, it elevates him. For example, if you are drop dead gorgeous and he owns you, it makes him irresistible. If you are hyper intelligent and he owns you, it means that he is a genius. It all reflects on him. Having idealized you in a love bombing phase. So the love bombing phase is not about you. It's about him. He's trying to convince himself, actually. He's talking to himself. When he tells you, wow, you're amazing, he's not telling you, wow, you're amazing. He's telling himself, wow, she's amazing. Because he's trying to shapeshift you, to mold you, to fit into the perfection that he is. He's godlike.
Right.
Okay. So now the love bombing is over. You're both idealized. You're an object in his mind, in what we call an introject. You're an internal object in his mind. And it's time to move to the next stage. And the next stage is converting you into a maternal figure. And this stage is the dual mothership. The dual mothership is a narcissist strikes a bargain with you. He says, I'm going to love you the way a mother loves her newborn. I'm going to love you unconditionally. I'm going to idealize you the way a mother idealizes her baby. In return, you're going to do the same to me. You're going to idealize me the way a mother idealizes her baby. I'm going to be your baby. And you're going to become my mother. I'm going to be your mother. You're going to be my mother. Dual mothership. And as a maternal figure, I need you to be there for me. I need you to accept me. I need you to embrace me. I need you to love me. I need you to hug me. I need you to support, buttress my fantasy, my inflated, fantastic self-concept. The way a mother would tell her kid, you're amazing, you're the most beautiful kid in the world. Same. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the bargain. And most people at this stage of the shared fantasy are already very deep in. They agree. They consent, they give consent. That point, at the height of the love bombing, the narcissist starts to abuse you egregiously. He starts to really torture you and torment you, and he cheats on you. There's strong elements of control, coercion, and so on. And the question is why? The day before, you were the queen. The day before, you were impeccable. The day before, you were perfection reified. What happened? What happened?
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
testing you.
Yeah.
He has converted you into a mother, but are you a real mother or are you just faking it? He needs
So
to find out.
what do you call that phase,
Narcissistic
Sam,
abuse.
where that narcissistic abuse, but would you say when they're at that heightened point of the love bombing stage and then it just basically comes to a screeching halt and they start to abuse you, would you say that's when they begin to devalue you?
No, on the very contrary, it's integral part of the idealization. What the narcissist is trying to do by abusing you is to prove to himself that you are a perfect mother who would love him unconditionally and would never walk
Right.
away. Would never walk away.
Okay.
Never mind what he does to you. You stick around, you're supportive, you're empathic, you provide succor, you're there for him. It's part of the idealization. That's what people fail to understand. The initial phase of the narcissistic abuse is a continuation of the idealization. It's putting you to the test to prove to himself that you're indeed a perfect mother.
Okay.
Now,
So, sorry, Sam. So, why do then they not just start off with the really egregious abuse, like to begin with? Why is it that so much of the time it seems to start off gradually where the victims
Because he
don't
can't trust
notice?
you. He can't trust you not to walk away. He doesn't know yet. You have established the parameters of the shared fantasy and you have agreed, you've struck the dual mothership contract. You agree to be his mother, he agrees to be a mother. But are you a real mother? Don't forget, narcissism involves paranoid ideation. He's very suspicious of you. He's very, very hypervigilant. He's very wary. He needs to test you. But if he tests you too extremely to start with, you'll walk away. He cannot be certain that you will not walk away because maybe you're faking. So he starts gradually. This is the first phase of narcissistic abuse. And then he escalates and escalates, constantly testing you. At some point, he stops. He says, okay, she has established her credentials as a perfect mother. She's still here, despite everything I've done to her. Still here. Okay, I can trust her. She's a mother. Now that she is a mother, I can move on to the next phase in the shared fantasy. One comment here, one disclaimer or caveat or call it whatever. The shared fantasy is inexorable. It's a machinery in motion. It consumes both the narcissist and his victims. It's not something the narcissist controls, not something he can reverse, that he can do nothing. Once it's set in motion, it goes to the very end. So there's nothing you could have done. Because I hear many victims, they say, if I only had I only acted this way, had I only not done this, had I only loved him more, had I only loved him less, there's nothing you could have done. You are both captives, the cogs and wheels of the shared fantasy. End of story. It's a machinery in motion. So the next phase is devaluation. Why would the narcissist need to devalue you? Because you're a maternal figure. The narcissism today, we know that pathological narcissism is a failure in early childhood dynamics. And I'm not going right now into the question whether there is a genetic component in narcissism, brain abnormalities, and so on. Probably there are. There is no evidence of this yet. It's very likely that there is a genetic hereditary component and a brain abnormality. However, everyone agrees, no exception, that without adverse childhood circumstances, there would be no pathological narcissism. Even if there is a genetic propensity or predisposition, and even if there is a brain abnormality, they are not triggered. They're triggered by childhood abuse and trauma. So this is in the background of all narcissists that we've ever interviewed, clinical settings, case studies. They all have a period of childhood abuse and trauma. Abuse and trauma have many forms. They're multifarious. You could have classic abuse, physical, verbal, sexual. You could have other forms of abuse, instrumentalizing the child, using the child to realize your own unfulfilled dreams and wishes, parentifying the child, spoiling the child, pampering the child, being overprotective. These are all forms of abuse. Okay. So we know that pathological narcissism is a failure in early childhood dynamics that lead to the emergence of the self. These dynamics in children who became later narcissists, these dynamics have been massively disrupted. Consequently, the narcissist does not possess a fully integrated, fully constellated self. He's selfless, ironically. No ego. Narcissists have no ego to speak of. And one of the reasons is the mother did not allow the child to separate from her and to become an individual. The critical phase of separation individuation has been disrupted in early childhood. Narcissist never separated from his mother of origin, his biological mother, and he never became an individual. He's never become an individual. So now he's trying to make up for lost time. He's trying to recreate the dynamic with his new mother. The new mother is you. And he wants to recreate with you the same dynamics. In other words, he wants to separate from you and become an individual. He failed with his original mother. She wouldn't let him separate. She was what we call a dead mother emotionally. She wouldn't let him separate. So now he needs you. You're the new mother. You're the stand-in, and he's going to separate from you. And he's going to become an individual despite you. He's going to walk away from you the way he should have when he was 2 years old and was not allowed to. But how to separate from you? Remember, you're an idealized figure. You're perfection reified and embodied and personified. You're amazing counterpart. And you are, above all, the instrument of his own idealization. So how would he get rid of you? How to do that? He needs to change the way he sees you. It's a precondition from separating from you. So he devalues you. Initially, he devalues the internal object that represents you in his mind. And then, in order to avoid dissonance, to avoid a gap, to avoid a divergence, he devalues you as well, so that the external object, you, and the internal object match. They are both devalued. Having devalued you, the ground is set for the reenacted separation from the original mother. Now you are the mother. So he separates from you. That's a discard. The discard is a phase that I was the first to describe. Most of this language I coined in the 80s and 90s, including narcissistic abuse. So I had to describe this. It was never mentioned in the literature, in any literature. So I had to describe it. And so I chose the word discard. And it has to do with, so if you look at it, devaluation and discard is just other words for separation, individuation. It's exactly the same childhood dynamic, carried forward to adulthood with a new mother.
Oh my goodness.
And then he gets rid of it. And he's, yeah.
Sam, before we go on, can I just ask you about some of the techniques and strategies that the narcissist uses in when they're devaluing you, when they're separating and creating that new identity? Things, can you talk to us about phenomenon such as gaslighting, the silent treatment, isolation, projection, all of those tactics they use to make you feel devalued and, of course, confused because this person has done a shapeshift on you?
Yeah. Again, there is a confusion, especially online, between narcissists and psychopaths. In order to gaslight, you need to be able to tell the difference between reality and fantasy. And the gaslighting is always premeditated, deliberate, intentional, and goal-oriented. There's a goal to be accomplished by gaslighting. Consequently, narcissists do not gaslight because they are unable to tell the difference between reality and fantasy, and they're delusional. And almost everything they do is not premeditated or intentional. It's driven from the inside and is unconscious. However, the victim experiences it the same way. Whether you are gaslit intentionally by a psychopath or you are gaslit unintentionally by a narcissist who is not aware that he's gaslighting you, you as a victim experience it as gaslighting. Gradually, you lose what we call reality testing. You begin to doubt your own judgment and your own ability to evaluate and gauge reality. And because this becomes a source of serious fear, terror even, and discomfort, you begin to avoid reality altogether. You begin to constrict your life. You begin to withdraw and avoid. What the narcissist does essentially boils down to two major groups of techniques. They're in the devaluation phase. We'll come in a minute to the devaluation, but one group of techniques involve intermittent reinforcement. Intermittent reinforcement is unpredictable behavior, which is mutually exclusive. So I love you, I hate you, cold and hot, so you can't predict the next behavior, and you become highly dependent on the source of the behavior because the person who behaves unpredictably holds the keys to your well-being, to the stability of your moods, to your emotions, and so on. You become dependent on this person. So the intermittent reinforcement group of techniques have to do with control, basically. The second group of techniques has to do with, I would say, contempt and paranoia. So these groups of techniques involve putting you down, humiliating you, shaming you, denigrating you, diminishing you, comparing you unfavorably to other people, ignoring you completely, the silent treatment. You're not worthy of my communication. It's a signal. You're unworthy. In clinical terms, we say that the narcissist is trying to inculcate in you, to create in you an internalized bad object. The same way the narcissist causes you to doubt reality or your perception of reality, he causes you to doubt your perception of yourself, and you're beginning to lose your identity. There is an erosion in identity. Later on, you have what we call identity diffusion or identity disturbance. You no longer recognize yourself. Your actions surprise you. You say, I can't believe I've done this. I've never done this before. You begin to feel alienated and estranged, like you're a stranger to yourself. And all this is because the narcissist embeds in you voices that challenge your knowledge of yourself, the certainty that you used to have about yourself, and replace it with a much inferior view of yourself. And this whole thing is called entrainment. Entrainment is a new discovery. It was first described in neuroscientific literature 12 years ago. We discovered that using rhythmic sounds, repetitive rhythmic sounds, we can coordinate, we can synchronize the brain waves, the physical brain waves of two brains. The narcissist basically does the same. He uses verbal abuse, an emanation of sounds, which are usually repetitive. They're like mantra or whatever, and they're regular and so on. And there is a modicum of entrainment, brainwashing, if you wish. And all this has to do with the second group, which are based on contempt and paranoia. The paranoia kicks in a bit later when the narcissist converts you into an enemy, or clinically speaking, into a persecutory object. The narcissist begins to see you as a threat to the inner balance, his internal landscape, where all the internal objects are in harmony. They're all in an equilibrium, and the fact that you are diverging from the internal object that represents you in his mind threatens the whole structure, the whole house of cards. So he begins to regard you as an imminent threat, serious present danger. And at that point, you become an enemy. And he then conceives of you as evil, malevolent, malicious, and so on. So these are the stages. Intermittent reinforcement is a group of techniques, not only one. Contempt and installation of a bad object via entrainment and brainwashing and so on. Bad object in you. And finally, converting you into a persecutory object, paranoid ideation on the part of the narcissist, and he acts against you as if you're threatening him. The bad news is that a lot of this stays with you after the narcissist has left you or you have left the narcissist. There are traces, more than traces. These hyperstructures remain with you. For example, the narcissist's voice remains embedded in your head long after the narcissist is no longer in your life physically. It's there. It talks to you, manipulates you, it controls you, it undermines you, it challenges you, it doubts you. It's there all the time. And it's not a positive voice, ever. That's not the idealizing voice. That's a devaluing voice. So that's one example. But the changes are dramatic. Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Sam, can I just ask you if the narcissist is, I'm understanding, wanting you to reflect back to them how they view themselves, then why do they want to view you as this horrible enemy if they're looking for that image of themselves? Why do they make you feel so worthless?
Because your mother, they need to separate from you. What
Right.
way is there to separate from you? He needs to devalue you. What reason is there to separate from you? If you're ideal, if you're loving, I mean, why would he separate from you? He's not insane. So he needs to
Then
change the
why
way he sees you.
then why do they go about enacting these behaviors, these strategies, such as intermittent reinforcement, where they will, make you wait and never let you know when the reward is coming, so you'll hang around for long periods of time? Why do they do that, which is going to make the victim stay if they're trying to separate?
It's a control strategy. The narcissist, don't forget, is possessed of paranoid ideation. So simultaneously, he goes about the business of the shared fantasy, which involves separation and individuation. And in order to separate, he needs to change the way he sees you. So now you're devalued. Otherwise, there's no reason to separate. But while he's doing all this, he's perfectly aware that he's misbehaving. He doesn't call it misbehavior. He doesn't regard it as misbehavior, but he's aware that he's hurting you. He's aware that and he's afraid, simply afraid. There's paranoid ideation. So he needs to control you. It's about control. As I said, these are control strategies. So they're strategies and contempt strategies. And they go hand in hand because when you hold someone in contempt, they may strike back at you. There is this
Mhm.
fact. When you mistreat someone, when you abuse someone, when you traumatize someone, when you, as I said, hold someone in contempt, when you demean, and they may end up, doing something about it. And Narcissus is not an idiot. He's fully aware of that. Also, he has had previous experience, past experience, where maybe one of the victims and so on struck back. Maybe he did suffer consequences. We don't know. But the paranoid ideation is all pervasive, and narcissists always, in all relationships, intimate or not, they always try to control the environment. They are control freaks, absolute control freaks. And the paranoid ideation in the case of narcissists serves two purposes. Hypervigilance, where the narcissist scans the environment all the time for slights, insults, attacks, challenges, and so on. So this is hypervigilance. And there is a grandiose self-perception in paranoid ideation because it means that you are the focus and the center of attention. It's malign attention. There's a conspiracy against you. People are planning to do bad things to you, but you're still the center of attention. So it's aggrandizing, it's self-aggrandizing. And
Mhm.
so it fits the narcissistic pathology to be paranoid with you. Until the very last second, when the shared fantasy is dissolved, the narcissist is hell-bent on controlling you, on making sure that you won't surprise him somehow, that you won't break out of this prison, because if you break out too early, the shared fantasy is incomplete. When the shared fantasy is incomplete, he will try to hoover you, try to re-idealize you, and reintroduce you into a new shared fantasy. Sometimes the narcissist succeeds to get rid of you physically, discards you physically, or you discard the narcissist physically, but he was just beginning to change the internal object. He was in the beginning of changing the internal object. You felt bad and you walked away. And he was still, in the business of devaluing you. And so it's incomplete. When the shared fantasy doesn't reach its natural conclusion, he needs to hoover you. He needs to bring you back into the shared fantasy, the unfinished business, to settle.
Would you call that the hoovering stage when
Yeah.
they draw you back in, I
Yes,
guess,
that's
for
what I
what you
just said.
say,
I said twice,
another, yeah,
hoovering. Yeah. Yeah.
another round of abuse? Sam, I just wanted you to explain to our listeners the intentionality, because I heard you say that it's not actually intentional when they're gaslighting you, when it's a narcissist that's engaging in this behavior versus the behavior of a psychopath, where many victims would say that they know exactly what they're doing because they can stop it at the drop of a hat, depending on who's watching. So, can you talk to us about that word and the intentionality of their actions? Because the victims feel like the narcissist knows exactly what they're doing.
Victims need to demonize the narcissist. Again, in order to make sense of what has happened to them, they need to aggrandize the narcissist. They need to make the narcissist this evil, wicked, demonic entity that took over them. And, it's a morality play. It's like religion, something religious has happened to them, some epiphany and so on. While actually what has happened is that an asshole made fun of them and abused them and exploited them. And they can't admit this. They can't admit to having been stupid enough to end up with a narcissist. As simple as, I'm sorry to be blunt. Yeah. No one would say I've been so stupid. They would say, I have been the victim of this supernatural force, which is all cunning and scheming and malevolent. And narcissists cannot tell the difference between reality and fantasy. They're delusional. So when they say something, they believe it. They believe everything they say. Even evident lies, they believe it, and that's why they reject evidence to the contrary. Never mind how much evidence you present them with. They would argue, they would disagree, because they believe. We call this process confabulation. They don't lie. Narcissists don't lie, they confabulate. They create alternative realities, alternative narratives, alternative stories. Then they come to believe this nonsense, this fiction that they've created, and then for them, it's a fact. And they would defend it to the death as a fact. They would never agree with you that it's a lie. Or similarly, when the narcissist makes a promise, he has every intention in the world to keep it. They never do. But when they make the promise, they mean it. When they tell you something, they believe it's true. They're delusional. Which part of mentally ill people cannot grasp? I have no idea. They're mentally ill. Not like psychopaths. Psychopaths are premeditated, they are intentional, they're cunning, they're scheming. Narcissists are just delusional, crazy, wackos, nuts. I don't know what other word to use. Okay, they're like psychotic.
I love those terms you use, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, like if a psychotic would come here and say, "Do you see the tree there?" And you look, and there's no tree. And you would tell the psychotic person, someone with psychosis, you would say schizophrenia. Yeah. They would say, but there's no tree. So what are you talking about? Of course there's a tree. I see it. That's a narcissist. So narcissists don't gaslight because they fully believe what they're saying. They believe their version of reality is the only reality. And your version of reality is wrong. They believe this. It's not that they're sitting back like the psychopath and they're saying, I know reality, but now I'm going to pretend that there's another reality in order to confuse her. That's not what they're doing. They really believe it. So the narcissist is trapped in the machinery of the shared fantasy as much as you are. Most of these things are unconscious. However, I'll tell you what I think confuses people. Narcissists are fully aware of their actions. They know exactly what they're doing. And they know the difference between right and wrong. So people say, wait a minute, if they know what they're doing, and if they know the difference between right and wrong, they're evil. They're demonic because they act, they're aware of their action.
But I think that's what the most confusing thing for victims is if they actually believe everything they're doing, then how do they hurt this person knowing that it's hurting them? And especially when their victim is telling them
this is hurting them. This is the confusion. They know what they're doing, but they don't know why they're doing it. And they regard everything they're doing as morally positive, as a good thing. Right. They don't regard anything they're doing as bad or evil or wrong or immoral. No way. So if he's hurting you, he would say, I'm doing this to make you a better person. It's because I love you. It's tough love. I'm hurting you to wake you up, to educate you, to elevate you, to improve you. That's what I'm doing. I'm isolating you from your friends because they're not really your friends. They just want to exploit you. I don't want you to talk to your mother because she's poisoning our relationship. They don't see what they're doing as as evil or bad or wrong. Never, ever, period. They are fully aware of what they're doing, but whatever it is they're doing is embedded in an integral part of a fantasy. And the fantasy is self-justifying. Because they cannot tell the difference between reality and fantasy, the fantasy legitimizes everything they're doing. So yes, you can be aware of what you're doing and still believe that what you're doing is good. You know, if you read books written by Nazis in Nazi Germany, they say, we are exterminating the Jews, we are killing them, yes, but it is a good thing we are doing. We are helping humanity. We are protecting and cleansing Europe. You know what I mean?
So they justify their abuse.
Yes,
They
but
they know
they don't
it's
regard it
hurting
as
this
abuse.
person, but it's serving a purpose and it justifies the greater
They
good.
don't see this as abuse. Abuse is your word. They don't see this as abuse. You see it as abuse. But you see it as abuse because you're inferior, you're stupid, you are evil, maybe. You see it as abuse because your reality, your perception of reality is wrong. Your reality testing needs fixing, not theirs. Their reality testing is perfect. So there's a huge difference between narcissists and psychopaths. They're not the same. And people confuse, and many self-styled experts online confuse all these. They attribute psychopathic traits and behaviors and psychodynamics to narcissists, whereas it's not the same.
So Sam, I didn't want to get into it too much in this episode, the difference, because I know we could talk about that for an entire episode, the difference between NPD and psychopathy. Can you just briefly give us a snapshot of the difference? Because it sounds like very well many victims may actually be with someone who is a psychopath rather than someone who has NPD.
Exactly. Very well said. I suspect that many victims online, and I visit the forums regularly and so on, actually not talking about narcissists at all. They're talking about, for example, partners who committed crimes regularly. And that's not a narcissist. Narcissists are pro-social. Narcissists need society because they need narcissistic supply. They need feedback from people. Psychopaths are criminalized. Yes, psychopaths commit crimes a lot. They talk about people who are extremely physically violent and so on and so forth. This happens with narcissists, but it's extremely rare. That's much more common among psychopaths. Maybe half of them are physically violent. So yes, I think many victims will actually spend time with a psychopath. However, there is a hybrid of psychopath and narcissist. It's known as malignant narcissist. The malignant narcissist or psychopathic narcissist is a combination of narcissism, psychopathy, and sadism. About 3% of all narcissists are malignant narcissists. Excluding this group, which is really psychopathic, really gaslight, really, they resemble psychopaths actually. Excluding this group, the remaining 97% of narcissists are not like psychopaths in the following ways. Narcissists are crucially dependent on other people for input and feedback, which they use in order to regulate their internal environment. This input and feedback is known as narcissistic supply. So narcissists obtain narcissistic supply, and they use it to regulate their sense of self-esteem and self-worth and self-confidence and their self-concept, the way they see themselves. They buttress their fantasies, they uphold and support their fantasies. They need supply all the time. They are addicts, they're junkies. They're junkies of supply. The psychopath couldn't care less. Psychopaths are very often lone wolves. They're very often isolated, like, the Unabomber. They are people who don't care. They don't care about input from other people. They don't care what other people think. They don't need any feedback from the environment in order to regulate their internal landscape and psychodynamics. They're perfectly self-sufficient and so on. So number one, The total dependency on people, narcissist. Absolutely no dependency on people, psychopath. Number two,
But Sam, is it that black and white, or is there a crossover where someone can be psychopathic to some degree, but also, have that need for the attention of others
so as I
to
said, there are malignant
self-impact?
narcissists. There are malignant
Yeah.
narcissists, and in this 3%, we have this crossover, we have this hybrid. But
Mhm.
no, in the pure types, pure narcissist and pure psychopath, there's no bleeding over. These are pure
Right.
types. The second thing, the second difference is that narcissists cannot tell the difference between reality and fantasy. It's a delusional disorder, and they cannot tell the difference between internal and external. So if you become the narcissist's intimate partner, he regards you as an extension of himself, as some kind of figment in his imagination, as an internal object. Psychopaths are perfectly capable of telling the difference between reality and fantasy, and they're perfectly capable of telling the difference between internal and external. In this sense, the psychopath is a lot more mentally healthy than the narcissist. Narcissist, as Kernberg said, Otto Kernberg, the father of the field, he said that narcissism and borderline personalities, they're actually psychotic, almost psychotic. They're like, up there with schizophrenia. It's really bad. These are really bad disorders. Whereas psychopathy is more a problem in social functioning, in the willingness to obey the law and so on. Psychopathy is more like defiance, recklessness, is more behavioral, whereas narcissism is a total ruination, total devastation of all the major psychological aspects of the personality of the individual. It's much worse than psychopathy. So this is the second difference. And I would say that the third difference between psychopathy and narcissism is that psychopaths uh, don't have what Freud called repetition compulsions. In other words, psychopaths are much more agile and much more flexible in their reaction to the environment. They are contumacious, they reject authority, they're defiant, they're reckless, they are this, they're that, I agree. They're impulsive, psychopaths are impulsive, and so on. But they adapt, they are more adaptive. They're malleable, they're shapeshifters, they change, they're responsive to the environment, and so on. Whereas a narcissist is highly rigid. It's a totally rigid structure and must go from phase A to phase B to phase C to phase D, cannot stop, cannot change behaviors, cannot, redefine himself, rediscover himself, modify, transform, nothing. It's stuck. It's total rigidity.
And where does empathy fit in, Sam, in
Yeah.
both of these
Yeah, good
disorders?
question. We used to believe erroneously, until recently, we used to believe that narcissists and psychopaths do not possess empathy. As I said, erroneously, it's wrong. Today we know that both narcissists and psychopaths possess empathy, only partial empathy. So 30 years ago, I coined the phrase cold empathy. Cold empathy is a combination of cognitive empathy and reflexive empathy without emotional empathy. The affective empathy component is missing. So narcissists and psychopaths can empathize with you, but they will have no emotional reaction. Let me give you a crass, vulgar example. You have a
Please.
healthy person, like a joke, beginning of a joke. A healthy person, a narcissist, and a psychopath enter a bar, and they see a woman, they're men, and they see a woman crying. The healthy person would say, she's crying. Now, she's crying is the cognitive empathy. She's crying. Therefore,
Mhm.
she's sad. His face will change a bit. There will be micro expressions reflecting the fact that you're crying. That is reflexive empathy. And the healthy person would feel bad for you, would come to you and say, why are you crying? Can I help? Is there anything I can do? Well, I feel so bad. I can't see you crying. That's the affective empathy. Okay? That's the healthy person. Now, the psychopath would have a look at you and say, she is crying. That's the cognitive part. His face may change. That's a reflexive part. But then he will say, she is vulnerable. I can have sex with her, or I can take her money because she's vulnerable. She's not paying attention, or she's broken. You know, this is the way I can leverage her brokenness and vulnerability to obtain a goal. And the goal in this case, if she's a looker, the goal is sex, or maybe her money, or whatever. So
Right.
that's a
Yeah.
psychopath. A narcissist would say, so a narcissist would have a look and say, she's crying. That's cognitive empathy. His face might change, reflexive empathy. And then he would say, I'm the perfect solution. I can make her happy again. I'm going to restore her. I'm going to rescue her. I'm going to save her. I'm going to become her guru, her teacher. I'm going to restore, I'm going to rebuild her world. So he's going to aggrandize himself through,
He's going to
yeah,
seek in her the image that he sees
yes,
or wants in himself.
yes, he can
Okay.
idealize himself through her, not paying
Yes.
attention to her emotions and not reacting emotionally to her. Actually, the psychopath says, I can get her to have sex with me. That's the goal. And the narcissist says, I can get her to become a source of supply and participate in the fantasy. It's also goal-oriented. So they're both focused on goals, and they couldn't care less how you feel. They have no emotional response to how you feel. However, they do analyze you. They do realize you're sad, you're broken, you're damaged, and that requires empathy. And this type of empathy is known as cognitive empathy. And if they have facial expressions and so on, that's reflexive empathy. And together, this is known as cold empathy. Cold, like brr.
Sam, I could talk about this all day, but just for, I don't want to hold you up. I know your
No, you
time
can
is
hold me
so
out, but people
valuable,
will
but
not watch.
getting back to the idealization, devaluation, discard phase, please tell us now why the narcissist discards you, how they do it, and also if they let you know that they're done with you, they want to be rid of you, they're so glad you're gone. Why do they come back? Why do they continue to hoover?
I think if you were to replay or rewind what we have discussed, you will see that I answered these
Yes.
questions.
Yeah, I remember talking about hoovering, but I just wondered if you could give us a little bit more insight into the actual discard and what's going through the narcissist's mind when they've gone, that's it, I've had enough. I am now normally moving on to that new supply.
He devalues you. So there are two layers. There's the unconscious layer, the need to replay the dynamics with the mother. And there is a conscious layer. The conscious layer, you're being idealized and you're being devalued. Once you've been devalued, you're worthless. You've been devalued, you can no longer serve as a source of supply because now you can do no right, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're this, you're that. You cannot help the narcissist idealize himself.
Yeah.
You can provide services, but not sex, not supply, not, and who cares if you're there or not? You're a damaged goods, So having devalued you, and that is the first stage, already the narcissist loses all interest in you, a process known as decathexis. And then after that, the narcissist becomes paranoid about you. He begins to ask himself, is she plotting against me? Is she conspiring against me? Is she malevolent? Is she evil? Is she planning to do something to me? And so on. So you become an enemy. Of course, an enemy is intolerable. The narcissist discards overnight. Narcissist switches to complete. I mean, the discard is an abrupt act. It's never a process. It's not like discarding you in stages. Take 2 weeks, pack your things. Narcissist simply gives up on you in a split second, flip of a coin, and you're gone. And usually he insists on a physical representation of the discard. He insists that you move out. However, if you refuse to discard yourself, he will discard himself. So what he will do, if you refuse to discard himself, he will start to travel and find lovers everywhere. He will simply vanish from your life. He will disappear. So either way, he will get rid of you. One way or another, it will be literally overnight. The problem that victims have is that the devaluation phase is like an iceberg. 90% of it is happening underground and in the unconscious. Even the narcissist is not fully aware. And so when the devaluation finally erupts over the surface, when there's the 10% and then the discard, it comes as a shock. It comes as a surprise. The narcissist stews inside himself. The process of devaluation is a kind of uh, thing that's happening internally. Gradually, the contours and the shape and the content of the idealized image changes, and the image becomes dark and ugly and stupid. And so there's a new image emerging. This can take years sometimes decades, sometimes months, sometimes weeks, but it's a process. No one is aware of this process. Not the narcissist, not the partner, no one. It's unconscious. At some point, the narcissist suddenly becomes aware. He wakes up one morning, he says, "Oh my God, I thought she was intelligent. She's actually very stupid. And look at her, she's old and ugly." I mean, it comes to him as well as a sudden, abrupt realization. He's not aware that this has been taking place for months now. He's not aware of it. He's aware of the outcomes of the process. So then, overnight, you're devalued, and then later you become an enemy, and he wants to get rid of you immediately. He can't stand you. Just can't stand you. You irritate him, you annoy him, and he wants to get rid of you. And if you won't get rid of yourself, if you won't leave the room, I'll leave the room. So he goes away. There's also sometimes in very long-term relationships, which last 40 years and 20 years and 40, 50 years or whatever, people say, but it's not true. Some narcissists are married to the same woman, for 30 years.
Yes.
Yes, but within these 30 years, there are numerous cycles of idealization, devaluation, discard, idealization, devaluation, discard within the marriage. So you will
Yes.
have like 1 or 2 years of idealization, 1 or 2 years of evaluation, and then the narcissist would disappear for 2 years, would travel somewhere, have another lover, and then he would come back to the same marriage. And again, the
Yeah.
cycle was done. So
So, Sam, why is it that they so often make that discard when they just detach and act like you never existed? Why do they so often make that discard so cruel? Why does it have to be so memorable? Because victims will often say, as you know, that they did it on my birthday, or it was Christmas, or I was sick, or it was just so incredibly cruel.
you remember that the discard, on the surface level, the discard represents a much deeper psychological process, which is unconscious, and that is the need to separate from a mother figure, from a maternal figure. He needs to separate from the mother. And because the initial mother, the original mother, never allowed him to separate, was very clinging and protective and insecure and selfish and wouldn't allow him to separate. He needs to make sure that this time it happens. He needs to make it really extreme, unambiguous, unequivocal, clear, cruel, aggressive. He needs to make sure that there's no going back. He needs to make sure that this particular mother, the new mother, gets it. There's no misunderstanding here. I am separating from you, mother, and I'm doing it in a way that you can, this time, you cannot tether me, you cannot hold me back, you cannot, hold me as a hostage. So he needs to make it ostentatious. He needs to make it conspicuous, explicit, undebatable, indisputable. He needs to make it so that everyone understands what's happening. Okay, so that's one thing. Second thing, he's in panic. He's in panic because in his mind, the partner is an enemy by now. It's a persecutory object. And he is afraid. He's simply afraid. He needs to get rid of her because she constitutes a threat. I'm saying he, she. Remember, half of all.
Yes.
So she constitutes a threat, and he needs to get rid of her. Many narcissists at the discard phase develop extreme paranoid ideation. And so this is the second reason. The third reason is that you are an enemy. So you need to be punished. Justice needs to be restored. So this is a morality play. The narcissist is all good, you're all bad. This is called splitting. This is the splitting defense mechanism. Narcissists see themselves as all good, you're all bad. And as an all bad, wicked, evil entity, you need absolutely to be penalized and you need to suffer for your misconduct and your evil intentions and your failure to conform to the idealized image. It's a failure. You failed him. You betrayed him. It's a betrayal. So of course he's angry at you and aggressive, and he wants to punish you. You were supposed to be the perfect mother forever and ever, amen, and you failed him because suddenly, for reasons that he is not aware of, you became a different person. You used to be ideal, and now you're exactly the opposite. You used to be gorgeous, now you're ugly. You used to be clever, now you're stupid. What happened? It's a betrayal. Sometimes he says she's doing it on purpose. She is acting stupid. She's not stupid. Or she's neglecting herself. She could be gorgeous, but she's neglecting. And she's doing it to torture me. She's doing it on purpose, you know?
She's doing it to me, the
To me,
narcissist,
yes. She's doing it to
because
me.
it's
And I'm
it's
angry at her. It's like a kid. Listen, the mental age, the psychological age of a narcissist is between 2 and 3 years. It's a kid. It's an infant or toddler with a temper tantrum. And he's angry at mommy. And he wants to punish her. And he will say bad things, and he will break plates, and he will break his whatever toy he has, and so on. That's the discard. He's discarding mother. And then there's a huge hope. In the wake of the discard, the narcissist experiences enormous relief and a huge hope. It's a hopeful event. This is what victims fail to understand. They think the discard is traumatic to both partners. Like the narcissist is also traumatized, that's why he's coming back to hoover them. No, the narcissist in the wake of the discard is a liberated man. He finally can become an individual, divided. He got rid of his mother this time. He failed with the original mother. He succeeded with this mother. He can now become an individual, his own man. He's relieved. He's exalted. He's elated. He's in an amazing state, until the same dynamics set in. First of all, the internal object is still active, while the external object is gone, discarded. The internal object is still there. What to do about it? Creates dissonance. And then he cannot be an individual. Never mind how hard he tries. Don't forget, he doesn't have a self. He's not in possession of a self. He has a self, but it's like not constellated, not integrated. Identity diffusion. It's a mess, like borderline. So there's no way he can become an individual. It's not a question of finding a new mother, separating from her, and becoming a human being, a man, an entity, a person, personhood. No, there's no solution to this. So he needs to find another mother urgently. He needs another mother.
I think you've just answered my next question, which was going to be, so if they want to be an individual, why do they have that next victim, that next target, just ready on hand to start the process again? Because what I'm hearing is that what I'm hearing you say is that as much as they want to be an individual, they get to that stage where they've failed and they've just got to go through that cycle where they find that mother figure and start the cycle all over again.
Yes, because they fail to become an individual. They succeed to separate, but they fail to become an individual. It's too late. You can't form a functional self at age 40. Never mind what self-interested coaches and therapists would tell you. That's nonsense. You cannot create what Freud used to call ego. You cannot create these functions late in life, let's say. When you have crossed late adolescence, you're done. This is it for life. Everything in you is set, not in stone. Of course, changes are possible and so on, but not major changes. Like you can change a few things, your behaviors, new knowledge and so on, but you cannot change who you are. Who you are, essentially, is the process ends at the end of adolescence. This is what adolescence is all about. So it's too late. There's nothing he can do about it. He thinks if he finds a new mother and a new mother and a new mother, one of these mothers will allow him finally to become himself. There's no self there, so he cannot be himself. The narcissist experience is that of an emptiness, exactly like the borderline personality disorder. Now, people think that emptiness is a poetic metaphor. It's not. It's a diagnostic criterion. In the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, one of the criteria of borderline personality disorder is internal emptiness. A narcissist is an absence pretending to be a presence. There's nobody there. And this feeling of all-consuming emptiness, this black hole that threatens to digest the narcissist, is terrifying. And the narcissist needs other people to fulfill this emptiness, to constantly simulate a life. He's using other people to simulate a self, to simulate a life, to simulate an existence, all a simulation. And this consumes his entirety. This is what he's all about. And so when he's in an intimate relationships, he expects the maternal figure to cater to plug this hole in him, to eliminate the black hole, to make him feel alive. A borderline would describe this. A borderline would tell you, when I'm with an intimate partner, I come alive. I feel alive. And when I'm not with someone, I feel dead. She would say this, but a borderline is much more honest. A narcissist is much more fallacious. So a narcissist would never admit it, but it's exactly the same experience. This, what we call schizoid empty core, the total solipsistic isolation, the inability to become, the inability to be the you that interacts with the world. There's no you, and you therefore cannot interact with the world. And it's a desperate quest to become, simply to finally become. You're like a potential, but not a human being. And you want to convert yourself into a human being. And you say, people have to help me. Some people will give me feedbacks, others will give me input, adulation, admiration, this, that, love. The ultimate solution is love. What kind of love? Maternal love, because I need this love to be unconditional. Adult love is conditional. Adult, mature, healthy love is conditional. That's not the kind of love I need, says the narcissist. I need unconditional love.
Right. Sam, I'm pretty sure that you've answered once again my next question, which was going to be, why does the narcissist, if they're done with you, they're sure they're going to discard you, then how do they make that point in time when they start looking for the next supply? When do they distinguish that I can see this coming to an end, I better start looking because I simply can't be alone with this true self?
Not true self, false self. Narcissists don't have
Sorry, false self.
false self.
Yes.
The false self is a narrative. It's a piece of fiction that upholds, supports an inflated, fantastic, counterfactual self-concept.
Right.
Narcissist's image of himself as godlike. It's a good question. The narcissist starts to look for replacements and substitutes when the devaluation becomes conscious. So you remember, there's an unconscious phase of devaluing the internal object. In the unconscious phase, the internal object that represents the partner in the narcissist's mind, that object is being devalued, but the narcissist is still not aware of it. Once the devaluation of the internal object is complete, it erupts into consciousness. Suddenly narcissist wakes up one morning and says, oh my God, I got it all wrong. He doesn't say I got it all wrong, he's always right, but she has changed. She has changed, or she's under the influence of people, bad people. Her friends are bad, her family is bad. Be that as it may, it's no longer the person I've idealized. So when this reaches awareness, at that point, the narcissist begins to look for substitutes. And he's not looking for substitutes the way one would make a map or something. He begins to develop relationships, alternative relationships, full-fledged. In other words, He begins to idealize. He begins to he spots, he auditions, and he begins to love bomb and idealize someone else. And this takes place as the internal object, the devalued internal object, erupts into consciousness. The narcissist, to avoid discrepancy, to avoid dissonance, devalues the external object, and then there's a discard. And so, towards the middle of the relationship, when the devaluation sets in, the narcissist already begins to look for substitutes.
Right. They simply can't be alone with
No,
that.
they can't be alone in this
self-worth.
sense.
They're
It's a
always
very pertinent, it's a pertinent observation. They can't be alone because this is typical of borderline. Borderline personality disorder, borderlines cannot be alone. And Kernberg suggested that pathological narcissism is actually a defense against borderline. He says all narcissists are at the core borderlines, but they have defenses against the borderline core, the borderline personality organization. There's a defenses, and these defenses are what we call pathological narcissism. When these defenses fail, which is called decompensation, when these defenses fail, what is left is the borderline core. So when the narcissist is humiliated, when the narcissist becomes aware of his own shame, when the narcissist is discarded, when the narcissist discards someone, so he's momentarily without a shared fantasy. In all these situations, the defenses crumble. There's a decompensation. And what's left behind is a borderline. Is someone with emotional dysregulation, is afraid to be alone, has suicidal ideation, exact description of a borderline. It's fascinating.
absolutely fascinating. Oh my goodness, I could talk to you
There was a
all
psychoanalyst.
day.
There was a
Sorry,
psychoanalyst. His name was Grossstein. And Grossstein said that narcissists borderlines are failed narcissists. He said what happens is the child becomes a borderline. Child subjected to abuse, trauma, and so on. Becomes a borderline. Then borderline is an unpleasant situation because there's emotional dysregulation, overwhelmed by your own emotions, there is mood lability, it sucks. It sucks to be a borderline. So the child attempts to develop defenses against the borderline state. He says, the child who succeeds to develop defenses and subdue the borderline state is the narcissist. The child who fails is the borderline. Interesting conception. By the way, I'm having a 3-day free seminar.
Please tell everyone about it, Sam, or put a link in the comments because I'm sure there will be many people who want to
Unfortunately,
attend.
it's in person, only in person.
Oh, damn. I guess we won't be able to see it here from Australia. But look, Sam, one last question. What are the long-term effects on victims, such as, the ones we hear about all the time, anxiety, self-doubt, trust issues, just all of those issues that endure way after they've been discarded by the narcissist? Like, what are some practical strategies for victims to be able to heal, understand, process their trauma, and eventually move on?
Well, that's exactly the seminar. And rather than answering this in detail, because this merits a separate conversation, rather than answer, I would refer people to my YouTube channel where there is a playlist. The playlist is titled Narcissistic Abuse, Healing and Recovery. The playlist is made up of 100+ videos, and they're constructed as a course. They're like you have start with video number 1, video number 2, video number 3, and the videos describe all the impacts of narcissistic abuse, the long-term effects, and how to get rid of them, how to heal and recover. All the list is based on recent science and recent discoveries and so on. And rather than answer you, I suggest that people go to the playlist and go through it. And I think they will get all the questions will be answered.
Absolutely. Sounds like an absolutely amazing resource, guys. So make sure you go to Dr. Sam Vaknin's YouTube channel. So, look, Sam, I just wanted to say thank you so much for giving me so much of your valuable time. It's been an amazing discussion. I know I've learned so much, and I would be thrilled if you would come back and chat with me again, but we can talk about that later. But I just wanted to say thank you. I know that there will be so many people out there today who will come to your channel and learn from it, and who will also obviously listen to this episode and gain so much insight as I have. So yes, thank you, Sam,
Thank you for the
and
opportunity.
I really hope to see you again soon.
Thank you for the opportunity. And have a nice day then. Night.
You too.
Have a nice night. Have a good night.
Thank-
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sam.
Bye.